If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to hit that like button and leave a comment telling me which moment touched your heart the most. Subscribe so you don't miss the next chapters. The crystal chandelier in Nathan Blackwood's office trembled as he slammed his palm against the mahogany desk. 12 board members sat frozen around the conference table, their faces pale beneath the harsh fluorescent lights of the 47th floor. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, Boston's skyline stretched toward the harbor, indifferent to the tension consuming the room. "I don't care if it costs us the entire Pacific Rim expansion," Nathan said, his voice cutting through the silence like shattered glass. "We are not cutting the children's wing from the hospital project. Find another way to balance the budget." Richard Morrison, the silver-haired CFO who had served Nathan's father before him, cleared his throat nervously. "Mr. Blackwood, the shareholders are expecting a certain return on investment. If we maintain the children's wing at full capacity, we're looking at a 12% reduction in projected profits for the fiscal year. Then the shareholders will have to adjust their expectations." Nathan's jaw tightened, the muscle there pulsing visibly. This company was built on more than profit margins. "My father believed in giving back to the community that supported us. I will not be the Blackwood who abandons that legacy for a few extra points on a quarterly report." His phone vibrated against the polished wood surface, then again, 3 times in rapid succession, the urgent pattern he had programmed for only one number in the entire world. Nathan glanced at the screen. Martha, his mother's caretaker. The woman who had been watching Oliver for the past 3 years since Catherine had walked out, leaving nothing but divorce papers and a traumatized 4-year-old behind. She never called during business hours unless something was terribly wrong. He answered on the 4th ring, already rising from his leather chair. "Mr. Blackwood, you need to come home, now." Martha's voice shook in a way he had never heard before, each word trembling with barely contained panic. "Oliver is having another episode, and this time nothing is working. He won't eat. He won't sleep. He keeps asking for someone named Emma, and I don't know who that is, but he's been crying for 2 hours straight, and I've never seen him like this. I called Dr. Patterson, but she can't get here for another hour, and I don't know what else to do." The boardroom became irrelevant. The billion-dollar deal became meaningless. Nathan was already grabbing his coat from the back of his chair, ignoring the confused murmurs of the executives around him. "I'm on my way." He ended the call and turned to Richard. "Meeting adjourned. We'll reconvene Monday morning. But the Singapore delegation is arriving tomorrow. Then handle it." Nathan was already halfway to the door, his long strides eating up the distance. "That's what I pay you for." 23 minutes later, his Mercedes screeched into the circular driveway of the Blackwood estate. The massive colonial mansion loomed against the grey October sky, its white columns and black shutters a testament to 4 generations of Blackwood wealth. Nathan barely noticed its grandeur anymore. He had grown up in these halls, learned to walk on these marble floors, spoken his first words in the nursery, now occupied by his own son. He had inherited this empire when his father died 8 years ago, along with the crushing weight of responsibility that came with it. None of it mattered when Oliver was suffering. He found Martha in the kitchen, wringing her hands. Her silver hair was disheveled, her usually composed face lined with worry. The woman had weathered every crisis this family had thrown at her with grace and efficiency, from Nathan's mother's decline into dementia to Catherine's spectacular exit. But today she looked utterly defeated, her shoulders slumped with exhaustion. "Where is he?" "The garden room. But Mr. Blackwood, there's someone with him." Martha's voice dropped to a whisper. "My daughter stopped by to bring me my heart medication, and she heard Oliver crying from the front hall. She went to check on him before I could stop her, and somehow she trailed off, gesturing helplessly toward the glass-enclosed conservatory at the back of the house." Nathan moved through the familiar corridors, his footsteps echoing against the hardwood. The garden room had been Catherine's project, her one contribution to the estate during their brief marriage. She had filled it with exotic plants imported from 3 continents, spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on specimens that required full-time care. When she left, She had taken the jewelry and the cars, but abandoned the greenery, much like she had abandoned her son. After the divorce, Nathan had considered tearing the whole thing down, erasing every trace of her presence from their home. But Oliver loved the plants, loved sitting among the ferns and flowers when the world became too overwhelming. So the garden room remained, a beautiful reminder of someone who had chosen to leave. He stopped at the threshold, the words dying in his throat. Oliver sat cross-legged on the cool tile floor, his small body no longer shaking. His tear-streaked face was turned upward, watching a young woman who knelt before him with an expression of pure concentration. The afternoon light filtered through the glass walls, casting soft shadows across their figures, turning the ordinary into something almost sacred. She was counting. Her voice was warm and steady, like honey mixed with steel. 4 things you can touch, she said softly. Can you tell me 4 things you can touch right now, Oliver? Oliver sniffled, his small chest still hitching from the crying. The floor. It's cold. That's 1. 3 more. Take your time. There's no rush at all. My shirt. It's soft. He rubbed the fabric between his fingers. The one with the dinosaurs that Martha got me for my birthday. Good. Keep going. You're doing so well. Your hand. Oliver reached out and placed his tiny palm against hers. It's warm, really warm, like when Daddy makes me hot cocoa. And 1 more thing. The leaf. He pointed to the massive monstera plant behind her. The big green leaf. It looks like it has holes on purpose, like someone punched it but in a nice way. Nathan watched in stunned silence as his son's breathing slowed. The panic that had gripped Oliver's small frame for hours was dissolving under this stranger's patient guidance, melting away like morning frost under sunshine. Now 3 things you can hear, she continued. The birds outside, they're singing like they're happy about something. Oliver tilted his head, concentrating. The fountain in the corner and... He paused, his brow furrowing. Your voice. I really like your voice. It makes the scary feelings smaller somehow. The woman smiled, and something shifted in Nathan's chest. It was an unfamiliar sensation, unsettling in its intensity, like watching a sunrise after years of darkness. 2 things you can smell. The flowers, the purple ones smell sweet, like candy. Oliver inhaled deeply. And cookies. Martha was making chocolate chip cookies before I got scared. They were supposed to be a surprise for when you visited. 1 thing you can taste. Oliver's face scrunched up thoughtfully. My tears, they taste really salty. Is that bad? That's perfectly normal, sweetheart. Tears are just feelings that needed to come out. They're not bad at all. They're actually brave. She brushed a strand of hair from his forehead with a tenderness that made Nathan's throat tighten. How do you feel now? Better. Oliver's voice was stronger now, steadier. The scary feeling went away. Did I count it away? You absolutely did, because you're incredibly brave, Oliver. The scary feelings will come back sometimes, but now you know how to make them smaller. You counted them away all by yourself. Nathan stepped forward, and both heads turned toward him. Oliver's face lit up with recognition and something that looked remarkably like pride. Daddy, did you see? Emma taught me to count the scary feelings away. She made them small. The boy launched himself across the room, and Nathan caught him mid-air, holding his son against his chest with a ferocity that surprised even himself. He could feel Oliver's heartbeat, fast but steady, against his own. I saw, buddy. I'm so proud of you. I'm right here now. Over Oliver's shoulder, Nathan studied the woman who had accomplished in minutes what therapists had failed to achieve in months. She was young, mid-20s perhaps, with light brown hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Her eyes were a striking shade of blue-gray, intelligent and guarded. She wore simple clothes, jeans and a white blouse, but carried herself with a quiet dignity that seemed at odds with her apparent circumstances. Who are you? The question came out harsher than he intended, colored by the adrenaline still coursing through his veins. She rose gracefully, brushing off her knees. Emma Carter, Martha's daughter. The babysitter's daughter, Nathan repeated slowly, unable to keep the skepticism from his voice. And you just happen to know exactly how to handle a severe anxiety episode in a 6-year-old? Something flickered in her eyes. Pain, perhaps, or anger, maybe both. It was gone before he could identify it, replaced by a careful neutrality that felt practiced. I worked in the restaurant industry for a while. You learn to stay calm under pressure. Her tone was pleasant enough, but there was an edge beneath it that intrigued him. I should go. My mother needs her medication, and I have a shift starting in 2 hours. Wait. Nathan set Oliver down, but kept one hand on his son's shoulder. The boy immediately reached for Emma's hand, and she allowed him to take it without hesitation. What you did just now, that breathing technique, the counting exercise, that wasn't restaurant training. That was something else entirely. Emma's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. I read a lot. You're lying. And you're rude. She extracted her hand gently from Oliver's grip, kneeling to meet his eyes. Remember what I taught you, okay? When the scary feelings come, you count. 4 things you can touch, 3 you can hear, 2 you can smell, 1 you can taste. Can you do that for me? Oliver nodded solemnly. I'll practice every day, I promise. Good boy. She pressed a kiss to Oliver's forehead, then stood and walked past Nathan without another word. He watched her go, noting the slight tremor in her hands that belied her calm exterior. Martha's daughter, a waitress who read a lot, a stranger who had reached his son when no one else could. Nathan Blackwood hadn't built a billion-dollar empire by accepting convenient explanations. There was more to Emma Carter than she wanted anyone to know, and he was going to find out what it was. 3 days later, Nathan found himself doing something he had never done in his 36 years of existence, sitting in a booth at Rosie's Diner on the corner of Beacon and Charles, pretending to read a menu he had already memorized twice over. Emma worked the morning shift. She moved between tables with an efficiency that spoke of years of practice, her smile genuine enough to earn generous tips, but never quite reaching her eyes. She wore the same red apron as the other waitresses, but somehow she made it look different, elegant even, as if she were playing a role in a production only she understood. Nathan had spent 72 hours compiling information about her through channels both official and otherwise. Emma Rose Carter, 27 years old, bachelor's degree in psychology from Boston University, graduated summa cum laude with a thesis that her advisor still cited as one of the best she had ever supervised. Master's degree in child development from Harvard, completed in half, the usual time with research that was still referenced in academic journals across the country. 3 years as a licensed child psychologist at the Peterson Institute for Childhood Development, where she had pioneered a new approach to treating anxiety disorders in young children. Her technique, which she called grounding integration therapy, had reduced symptoms by 40% in clinical trials, earning her recognition from the American Psychological Association and a profile in Psychology Today. And then, 18 months ago, everything stopped. She resigned from the institute, let her license lapse, and took a job serving pancakes and coffee to strangers. The transformation was so abrupt, so complete, that it left only questions in its wake. The report on his desk mentioned a patient, a young girl named Sophie Reyes, who had died under circumstances that remained sealed in confidential records. The connection to Emma's career destruction was obvious, even if the details remained hidden behind walls of privacy and pain. You again. Nathan looked up to find Emma standing beside his table, order pad in hand. Her expression was carefully neutral, but her eyes held a wariness that hadn't been there during their first meeting. The coffee here is exceptional, he said evenly. It's the same Folgers you can buy at any supermarket for $8 a can. Don't insult both of us by pretending otherwise. Perhaps it's the service that keeps me coming back. Then you're in the wrong booth. Jessica handles this section. She gestured toward a blonde waitress on the other side of the restaurant. I can transfer your check. I requested you specifically. Nathan leaned back against the vinyl seat, studying her reaction with the same intensity he brought to hostile negotiations. The manager was very accommodating once I explained that I'm considering this location for a corporate catering contract. The flash of anger in her eyes was satisfying. At least she wasn't completely unaffected by him. So you're using your money to manipulate minimum wage workers into serving you. How refreshingly original for a billionaire. I'm sure your shareholders would be proud of such innovative tactics. I'm using my resources to have a conversation with a woman who's been avoiding my calls for 3 days. I haven't been avoiding anything. I simply chose not to answer calls from an unknown number that happened to coincide with the number your assistant left with my mother. She flipped open her order pad with practiced efficiency. Coffee black? Anything else, or should I save you the pretense of ordering food you won't eat? Yes. An explanation for why someone with your qualifications is pouring coffee instead of helping children who desperately need her expertise. Nathan watched her face carefully, noting every micro-expression. Children like my son. Emma's pen froze mid-motion. When she looked up, the mask had cracked just enough to reveal the pain beneath. You had me investigated. I had questions that needed answers. Those answers aren't your business, Mr. Blackwood. My past belongs to me. They became my business the moment you helped Oliver. Nathan pulled a folded paper from his jacket pocket and slid it across the table. This is a contract. $50,000 for 3 months of private therapy sessions with my son. You can set your own schedule, work from my home or a location of your choosing, and maintain complete confidentiality. No insurance paperwork, no institutional oversight, no one looking over your shoulder. Emma didn't touch the paper. I'm not licensed anymore. Hiring me would be a liability for you. I'm not asking for a licensed therapist. I'm asking for Emma Carter, the woman who knew exactly what to say to my son when he was drowning in terror. He paused, letting the words sink in. The woman who clearly still cares about helping children, even if she's trying to pretend otherwise. You don't know anything about me. I know you graduated top of your class at 2 different universities. I know you developed innovative techniques that changed how professionals approach childhood anxiety. I know that 18 months ago, you walked away from everything you'd built and never looked back. Nathan held her gaze. What I don't know is why, and I suspect you're not willing to tell me. The diner noise faded around them. Emma's grip on her pen was so tight her knuckles had turned white, the only visible sign of the storm beneath her composure. The why isn't something you're entitled to understand, no matter how much money you wave around. Then help me understand what I can offer you that would make this work. Oliver hasn't spoken to any therapist since the divorce. He barely speaks to me most days. But he asked for you, Emma. For 3 days, he's been drawing pictures of a woman with brown hair who taught him to count away the scary feelings. His refrigerator is covered with them. Something broke in her expression, just for a moment before she rebuilt her walls with practiced efficiency. Your son needs professional help that I'm not qualified to provide anymore. I gave that up. My son needs someone who can reach him. You already have. One technique during one panic attack doesn't make me his savior, Mr. Blackwood. It makes me someone who was in the right place at the right time. Nathan, he stood, leaving several bills on the table that far exceeded the cost of the coffee he hadn't ordered. And maybe not his savior, but perhaps exactly what he needs right now. He walked toward the door, then paused and looked back. Emma stood frozen beside the booth, the contract still untouched on the table. Keep it, he said. Read it when you're ready. The offer doesn't expire. Outside, the autumn wind cut through his coat as Nathan climbed into his waiting car. His driver, Marcus, raised an eyebrow in the rearview mirror, but said nothing about the unusual detour. The office, sir? Not yet. Take me to the Peterson Institute for Childhood Development. If Emma Carter wouldn't tell him her secrets, he would find someone who would. 3 hours later, Nathan sat across from Dr. Margaret Holloway in her cramped office at the Institute. She was a severe woman in her 60s, with steel-grey hair and glasses that made her look perpetually disapproving. The walls were covered with awards and photographs of children she had helped over the decades. I'm not at liberty to discuss former employees, Mr. Blackwood. Surely you understand professional boundaries. I'm not asking you to violate anyone's privacy, Dr. Holloway. I'm asking you to help me understand how to help a former colleague who clearly still needs support." He paused. "And perhaps to explain why your institute allowed one of its most brilliant young psychologists to simply walk away without intervention." The director's lips pressed into a thin line. Emma's situation was complicated. Most situations worth understanding are. For a long moment, Dr. Holloway said nothing. She removed her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose, suddenly looking every one of her 63 years. There was a patient, a 7-year-old girl named Sophie Reyes. Severe anxiety, possible early-onset depression, with a family situation that complicated treatment significantly. Emma worked with her for 8 months, often staying late, coming in on weekends. They made remarkable progress. She paused. And then Sophie's parents pulled her from treatment against medical advice. They said they couldn't afford it anymore, couldn't make the drive anymore. 3 weeks later, the family's house caught fire during the night. Sophie didn't make it out. Nathan felt the words land like physical blows. That wasn't Emma's fault. Of course it wasn't. But Emma had warned Sophie's parents about the severity of their daughter's condition. She had documented everything, recommended intensive intervention, practically begged them to continue treatment. She even offered to work with Sophie for free. Dr. Holloway's voice softened. When Sophie died, something in Emma broke. She blamed herself for not doing more, for not finding a way to convince those parents to listen, for not saving that little girl's life. That's survivor's guilt. That's textbook trauma response. That's love, Mr. Blackwood. Emma loved that little girl, and she couldn't save her. The director met his eyes. "Whatever you're hoping to accomplish by bringing her back into this world, please consider whether you're doing it for your son's benefit or your own curiosity." Nathan drove back to the city in silence, Emma's contract still unsigned, her pain now a tangible weight in his understanding. He had wanted answers. Now he had them, and they only made everything more complicated. Because somewhere between investigating her past and confronting her present, Nathan Blackwood had begun to care about Emma Carter's future far more than he had any right to. Oliver's drawings covered the refrigerator door now, a gallery of crayon masterpieces created by small hands with big emotions. 15 pictures in 2 weeks, each featuring the same brown-haired woman with blue eyes and a kind smile. In some drawings, she held his hand. In others, she sat beside him under a tree filled with impossible purple leaves. In one particularly detailed piece, she wore a crown of stars and a cape made of rainbows. Nathan studied the latest edition, a crayon rendering of Emma surrounded by floating hearts and what appeared to be a dragon, while Martha prepared breakfast behind him. The kitchen smelled of coffee and fresh-baked muffins, but his appetite had vanished somewhere between the driveway and the refrigerator door. "She called last night," Martha said quietly, not looking up from the eggs she was scrambling. "Emma, she wanted to check on Oliver." Nathan turned. "Did she speak with him?" "For about 20 minutes. He told her about his drawings, about the new counting game he invented where you count animals instead of objects. He said he counted 14 dogs and 7 cats and 1 elephant that was actually a cloud." Martha's weathered face creased with concern. "Mr. Blackwood, my daughter has been through more than anyone should endure. Whatever you're planning, please remember that she's still healing." "I'm not planning anything except helping my son. With respect, sir, I've worked for this family for 11 years. I know when a Blackwood man is planning something." She finally met his eyes. "Your father had the same look when he was determined to acquire something. The difference is, Emma isn't a company. She's my daughter." Before Nathan could formulate a response, the doorbell rang. He frowned, checking his watch. 9:15 on a Saturday morning. His schedule was deliberately empty, blocked off for time with Oliver. He found Victoria Chen standing on his doorstep, her designer dress and flawless makeup entirely inappropriate for a casual weekend visit. His COO and former flame held a bottle of champagne and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Nathan, I heard you've been working from home lately. Thought I'd check on my favorite CEO, Victoria. He didn't step aside to let her in. This isn't a good time. It's never a good time with you. That's what I always loved about us, the challenge. She brushed past him before he could object, her heels clicking against the marble foyer. My God, this place is depressing without Catherine's touch. You need a woman's influence. Speaking of which, I've been meaning to discuss the Singapore merger, and I thought we could combine business with pleasure, like the old days. The old days ended 2 years ago, Victoria, by mutual agreement. Agreements can be renegotiated, especially when circumstances change. She set the champagne on a side table and turned to face him, her expression softening into something that might have been genuine. I know about the divorce taking its toll. I know Oliver's been struggling. Let me help, Nathan. I was good for you once. You were good for the company. There's a significant difference, Daddy. Oliver stood at the top of the stairs, his small face confused. He wore dinosaur pajamas and clutched a stuffed elephant named Harold that had seen better days. Who's that lady? He asked. Victoria's smile brightened with practiced warmth. Hello there. You must be Oliver. I'm Victoria, your daddy's very good friend. I've heard so much about you. Oliver's expression shuttered immediately, his small body tensing. You're not Emma. Who's Emma, sweetie? My friend. She teaches me things and she makes the scary feelings go away. Oliver looked at Nathan. Daddy, when is Emma coming back? The question pierced something in Nathan's chest. He walked to the stairs and lifted his son, holding him against his shoulder. I don't know, buddy, but I'm working on it. I want her to come today. The scary feelings are trying to come back, and I need to practice with her. I know you do. Victoria watched this exchange with barely concealed irritation. Nathan, we really should discuss the Singapore situation. Perhaps your nanny could take Oliver for his morning activities? Martha isn't a nanny. She's family. Nathan met Victoria's gaze over his son's head. And this isn't a good time. I'll have my assistant schedule a meeting for Monday. But I came all this way on a Saturday. Then you should have called first. His tone left no room for argument. Thank you for stopping by, Victoria. I'll see you at the office. After she left, muttering about ungrateful billionaires and wasted Saturdays, Nathan carried Oliver to the kitchen. Martha had prepared chocolate chip pancakes, Oliver's favorite, but the boy pushed them around his plate without eating. Hey! Nathan knelt beside his son's chair. What's going on in that head of yours? The scary feelings are trying to come back. They're not here yet, but they're coming. I can feel them in my stomach, like butterflies but mean ones. Do you want to try the counting game? Oliver shook his head. It works better when Emma does it. Her voice makes the scary feelings smaller. I don't know why it's different, but it is. Nathan's phone buzzed with a text from Victoria, demanding a response about Singapore. He ignored it, focusing entirely on his son. What if we called Emma? Would that help? Can we? Oliver's eyes lit up with hope so pure it was almost painful. I think so. Let me see what I can do. He stepped into the hallway and dialed the number from his contacts. Emma answered on the third ring, her voice cautious. Mr. Blackwood, I assume you're calling about the contract I still haven't signed. I'm calling about Oliver. He's having a difficult morning and asking for you. Silence on the other end. Then, softly, what kind of difficult? The scary feelings are trying to come back. His words. Nathan leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted. I know I have no right to ask anything of you, Emma, but my son believes you can help him, and right now I'm willing to try anything. I'm not the solution you think I am. Maybe not, but you're the one he's asking for. You're the one in all those drawings on our refrigerator. Another long pause. When Emma spoke again, her voice had changed, professional now, measured. Is he safe? No immediate crisis. He's safe, just struggling. Put him on the phone. I'll talk him through some exercises. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, she sighed. And Mr. Blackwood, this doesn't mean I'm accepting your contract. It means I'm helping a child who needs help. There's a difference. He handed the phone to Oliver, watching as his son's face transformed from anxiety to relief at the sound of Emma's voice. For 15 minutes, Nathan listened as she guided Oliver through breathing exercises, visualization techniques, and eventually a silly game about imaginary dragons that had Oliver giggling for the first time in days. When the call ended, Oliver handed back the phone with a smile Nathan hadn't seen in months. "Emma's going to think about coming to visit," Oliver announced. "She said she needs to be brave first, just like me." Later that night, after Oliver was asleep, Nathan sat in his home office staring at his computer screen. The Peterson Institute file was open, every detail of Emma's fall from grace documented in clinical language that failed to capture the human tragedy behind it. His phone lit up with another text from Victoria, then another from his mother, demanding to know when he would bring Oliver to visit. Then 3 emails from board members concerned about his recent absences. Nathan ignored them all. Instead, he typed a name into his private database, Sophie Reyes. The search returned minimal results, most sealed by family privacy requests. But one document caught his attention, a property record from 18 months ago. The Reyes family home, the one that had burned with Sophie inside, had been purchased from Blackwood Development Corp. It was part of a housing project Nathan had greenlit 5 years ago, a project that had cut corners on safety codes to meet budget constraints. Nathan's hands began to shake as he pulled up the construction reports. His signature was on the approval documents. He had authorized the budget cuts that had led to the substandard wiring that had started the fire that had killed the child that Emma Carter had loved. He had never known. He had never bothered to look closely enough to know, but now he did. And somehow he would have to find a way to tell Emma that the tragedy that had destroyed her career was connected to a decision he had made years ago, sitting in this very office, caring more about profit margins than the lives his choices affected. The irony wasn't lost on him. He had been trying to save Emma Carter from her past, never realizing that he was part of the reason it haunted her. 3 weeks had passed since Emma signed the contract, and the Blackwood estate had begun to feel less like a mausoleum and more like a home. Oliver's laughter echoed through the hallways now, a sound that had been absent for so long. Nathan had forgotten what it felt like to hear it bouncing off the marble walls and filling the empty spaces with warmth. Emma came every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, transforming the garden room into what Oliver called their brave space. She had covered one wall with drawings, created a corner filled with sensory objects like stress balls and textured fabrics, and established rituals that gave Oliver a sense of control he had never experienced before. There was the greeting song they sang together, the special handshake they had invented, the closing meditation that helped him transition back to regular activities. The change in the boy was remarkable, almost miraculous. His teachers had called to report that he was participating in class for the first time. His appetite had returned. He slept through the night without waking up screaming from nightmares about abandonment. The change in Nathan was harder to define. He found himself rearranging his schedule to be home during Emma's sessions. He told himself it was parental supervision, professional oversight. But the truth was simpler and more complicated. He wanted to see her. He wanted to watch her work, to listen to her voice as she guided his son through the dark forests of anxiety into clearings of calm. He wanted to understand how someone so broken could still give so much of herself to others. And underneath all of it, like a poison slowly spreading through his bloodstream, was the secret he still hadn't found the courage to reveal. The knowledge that he was connected to Sophie's death in ways Emma couldn't possibly imagine. "You're staring again." Nathan blinked, realizing he had been watching Emma through the garden room window for the past 10 minutes, while pretending to answer emails on his phone. She stood in the doorway now, arms crossed, her expression a mixture of amusement and wariness that had become familiar. "I was observing the session," he said, "professional interest." "Oliver's been asleep for 20 minutes. You've been observing an empty room and a collection of houseplants." He had no response to that, The truth was, he had been lost in thought, trapped in the endless loop of guilt and confession that had consumed him since the night he discovered his connection to Sophie Reyes. Every day he told himself he would tell her. Every day he found an excuse to postpone the conversation that would inevitably destroy whatever was building between them. "Can we talk?" Emma asked. "There's something I need to discuss with you about Oliver's progress." As they walked to the study, a room Nathan had inherited from his father, along with everything else in this sprawling empire. The walls were lined with leather-bound books he had never read, the desk cluttered with papers he should have signed days ago. Emma sat across from him, and for a moment the professional distance between them felt impossibly vast, a chasm neither of them knew how to bridge. "Oliver is making remarkable progress," she began. "His anxiety episodes have decreased by almost 70%. He's sleeping through the night without medication. He's starting to express his emotions verbally instead of through physical symptoms like stomach aches and headaches." "That's wonderful news." "It is." Emma paused, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "But I'm concerned about what happens when our contract ends. He's formed a significant attachment to me, Nathan. When I leave, there's a risk of regression. He might interpret my departure as another abandonment, like his mother." The use of his first name caught him off guard. She had been careful to maintain formality between them, a wall of professionalism that kept their interactions clinical and safe. But something had shifted in the past few weeks, something neither of them had acknowledged openly. "Then don't leave." The words escaped before he could stop them. Emma's eyes widened slightly, her composure flickering. "That's not how therapy works. The goal is to give Oliver the tools he needs to manage his anxiety independently, not to make him dependent on me or anyone else." "I'm not talking about therapy." Nathan leaned forward, the confession burning in his throat. "I'm talking about you, about us." "There is no us." "There could be." Emma stood abruptly, walking to the window. The afternoon light caught her profile, illuminating the tension in her jaw, the slight tremor in her hands that betrayed her calm facade. "You don't know what you're saying. You don't know who I am. I know everything about you, Emma. I know about Boston University and Harvard. I know about the Peterson Institute and the innovative work you did there." He paused, forcing the next words out. "I know about Sophie Reyes." She turned, and the look on her face made him feel like the worst kind of monster. There was betrayal there, and something deeper, a violation of trust that went beyond simple privacy. "You had no right." "I needed to understand. I needed to know why someone so brilliant was hiding in a diner, pouring coffee for strangers who couldn't possibly appreciate what they had in front of them. And now you know." Her voice was cold, controlled, each word carefully measured. "I killed a child, not directly but effectively. I failed her, and she died because of it. That's not what happened. The fire was an accident. Her parents removed her from treatment against your advice. None of that was your fault. You don't understand." Emma's composure cracked, and beneath it he saw the raw grief she had been carrying for 18 months. "I was supposed to save her. That was my job. That was my purpose. And when it mattered most, I couldn't convince her parents to let me help. I watched them take her away, knowing what would happen, and I did nothing. You did everything you could. It wasn't enough." Tears streamed down her face now, and Nathan found himself moving toward her, drawn by an instinct he couldn't control. "It's never enough. That's what I learned. You can give everything you have, everything you are, and it still won't be enough to save the people you love." He pulled her into his arms, and she let him. For a long moment they stood there, her tears soaking into his shirt, his hands running through her hair, in a gesture of comfort that felt more intimate than any kiss he had ever shared with anyone. "I have something to tell you," he whispered, "something that's going to change everything." But before he could speak, the door burst open with a violence that made both of them jump apart. Victoria Chen stood in the doorway, her designer suit immaculate, her expression triumphant. Behind her, Nathan could see 2 men in dark suits, their faces hard and unreadable, the kind of men who were paid to follow orders without asking questions. Well, well, Victoria said, her voice dripping with satisfaction. The billionaire and the babysitter's daughter. How delightfully scandalous. Nathan stepped in front of Emma instinctively, placing himself between her and the threat. What are you doing in my house, Victoria? Protecting my investment. She walked into the room as if she owned it, her heels clicking against the hardwood. You've been distracted lately, Nathan. Missing meetings, ignoring calls, delegating responsibilities you used to handle personally. The board is concerned about your leadership. The board answers to me. The board answers to shareholders. And the shareholders are starting to wonder if their CEO is mentally fit to run a billion-dollar company. Victoria's smile widened, especially when he's spending his days playing house with a disgraced psychologist and her trailer trash mother. Emma flinched as if she had been struck, and Nathan felt a rage, unlike anything he had experienced before, surge through his veins. Get out of my house, now! I'm afraid I can't do that. Victoria nodded to the men behind her. These gentlemen are from the board's legal counsel. They're here to discuss the terms of your temporary leave of absence while we conduct an investigation into your recent behavior. What investigation? We have evidence that you've been misappropriating company funds for personal expenses, specifically a $50,000 payment to an unlicensed individual for services that have nothing to do with Blackwood Industries. Nathan felt the blood drain from his face. The contract with Emma. He had paid her from his personal accounts, but Victoria must have found a way to twist the paper trail to make private transactions look like corporate misconduct. That payment was personal. It had nothing to do with the company. Try explaining that to the SEC. Victoria turned to Emma, her expression triumphant. And you, sweetheart, might want to start looking for a lawyer. Practicing psychology without a license is a felony in Massachusetts. Emma's face went pale. I never claimed to be practicing therapy. The contract was for educational consulting. That's not what the documents say. Victoria pulled a folder from her briefcase and tossed it onto Nathan's desk. Amazing what you can find when you know where to look. Emails discussing treatment plans, notes on psychological assessments, even recordings of sessions that sound remarkably like therapy to me. Nathan grabbed the folder, flipping through pages that made his stomach turn. The documents were fabricated, twisted versions of innocent communications, but they were convincing enough to cause serious legal problems. This is fraud, he said. You manufactured evidence. Prove it. Victoria's smile never wavered. In the meantime, I'll be running Blackwood Industries as interim CEO. Don't worry, I'll take good care of your company and your reputation. She turned to leave, then paused at the door, delivering her final blow with practiced cruelty. Oh, and Nathan, if you're thinking about fighting this, you might want to consider what happens to your son when both his father and his caretaker are tied up in criminal proceedings. Foster care can be so traumatic for children with anxiety disorders. The threat hung in the air like poison. Nathan watched Victoria walk away, his world crumbling around him. When he turned back to Emma, she was gathering her things with shaking hands. Where are you going? Away from here, away from you. She wouldn't meet his eyes. I should have known better than to get involved with someone like you. People in your world destroy everything they touch. Emma, please, this isn't what it looks like. It never is. She finally looked at him, and the betrayal in her eyes cut deeper than any of Victoria's threats. I trusted you. I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, I could have something good again. And now I'm going to lose everything. My freedom, my mother's job, any chance I had at rebuilding my life. I won't let that happen. You can't stop it. She walked toward the door, pausing only to deliver words that would haunt him. Goodbye, Nathan. Tell Oliver I'm sorry. Tell him the scary feelings aren't his fault. Tell him. Her voice broke and she fled before he could see her cry. Nathan stood alone in his father's study, surrounded by the weight of his failures. He had wanted to save Emma Carter. Instead, he had destroyed her all over again, and he still hadn't told her the worst truth of all. The rain had been falling for 3 days straight, as if Boston itself was mourning the collapse of everything Nathan had built. He sat in his darkened study, unshaven and unwashed, surrounded by empty bottles and legal documents that offered no solution to the nightmare his life had become. Victoria had moved fast. Within 48 hours, she had frozen his assets, locked him out of his own company, and launched a media campaign that painted him as a predator who had taken advantage of a vulnerable woman. The tabloids were having a field day with headlines like "Billionaire's Secret Sessions" and "The Babysitter's Daughter Scandal." The board had called an emergency meeting to discuss his permanent removal, and Emma was gone. Her apartment had been cleared out overnight. Martha had received a letter of resignation and a check returning every penny of the contract payment. Oliver had been asking for her constantly, his anxiety returning with a vengeance that made Nathan's heart shatter into smaller pieces every day. The boy had stopped eating again, stopped sleeping, stopped drawing pictures of the woman who had taught him to be brave. The only thing keeping him from complete despair was the folder on his desk, the one his private investigator had delivered that morning, with a grim expression that suggested the contents were explosive. Victoria Chen was not who she claimed to be. Her real name was Victoria Huang, and 15 years ago she had been a junior accountant at a small firm in San Francisco. A firm that had collapsed in scandal when its owner was convicted of embezzlement and fraud. Victoria had been the prosecution's star witness, the whistleblower who had brought down her own boss in exchange for immunity. But that wasn't the interesting part. The interesting part was that the owner of that firm had been Marcus Chen, Victoria's husband, a man she had married 6 months before the scandal broke and divorced 2 months after he went to prison. A man who had died in suspicious circumstances 3 years into his sentence, leaving behind a considerable life insurance policy that Victoria had collected without question. Victoria hadn't been a whistleblower. She had been a black widow, orchestrating the entire scheme to gain control of her husband's assets. And now she was doing the same thing to Nathan, following the same playbook she had used to destroy at least 3 other successful businessmen over the past decade. The evidence was circumstantial, but it was enough. Enough to cast doubt on her credibility. Enough to buy him time to find the proof he needed. But first, he had to find Emma. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Nathan grabbed it, his heart racing with desperate hope. The message contained only an address and 3 words: "She needs you." The address led him to a rundown motel on the outskirts of the city, the kind of place that rented rooms by the hour and asked no questions. Nathan found Emma's car in the parking lot, its windows fogged with condensation, a sad reminder of the life she had been forced to abandon. He knocked on the door of room 112 and waited, his heart pounding. When Emma opened the door, she looked like a ghost of the woman he had come to know. Her eyes were red and swollen, her hair tangled, her clothes the same ones she had been wearing when she fled his house 3 days ago. "How did you find me?" "Your mother. She's been worried sick about you." Emma laughed, a hollow sound that held no humor. "My mother should be worried about herself. Victoria's lawyers contacted her yesterday. They're threatening to sue for breach of contract, claiming she helped me deceive your family. That's not going to happen." Nathan stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. The room was small and dirty, the furniture stained with years of neglect. "I'm not going to let Victoria hurt you or your mother. You can't stop her. You can't even stop her from taking your company. Watch me." He pulled out his phone and showed her the file his investigator had compiled. "Victoria is a con artist. She married her first husband specifically to steal his company, then testified against him to avoid prosecution. She's been doing the same thing to businesses across the country for the past decade. There are at least 4 documented cases, probably more." Emma took the phone, scrolling through the documents with growing disbelief. "This is... How did you find this?" "I hired people who are very good at finding things that don't want to be found." Nathan sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly exhausted. I should have done it months ago. I should have seen what she was planning. Why didn't you? Because I was distracted. He looked up at her, and for the first time since that night in his study, he saw something other than hatred in her eyes. By you, by Oliver. By the possibility that maybe my life could be about more than profit margins and board meetings. Emma sat beside him, the phone still clutched in her hands. This changes everything. It changes some things. Nathan took a deep breath. But there's something else I need to tell you, something I should have told you weeks ago. What? The words felt like broken glass in his throat. The fire that killed Sophie Reyes, the house where it happened, it was built by my company. Emma went very still. 5 years ago, I approved a construction project in that neighborhood. We were over budget, behind schedule. My father had just died, and I was trying to prove I could run the company as well as he had. Nathan's voice cracked. Someone suggested cutting costs on the electrical wiring, using cheaper materials that met the minimum code requirements but weren't up to the standards we usually maintained. I signed off on it without really looking at the details. Nathan, the fire started because of faulty wiring, wiring that my company installed, wiring that I approved. Tears streamed down his face now, and he didn't try to stop them. Sophie died because I cared more about proving myself than about doing things right. I killed her, Emma, just as surely as if I had lit the match myself. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The rain continued to fall outside, a steady rhythm that seemed to mark the passage of something fundamental changing between them. Then Emma reached out and took his hand. I spent 18 months hating myself, she said quietly, believing that Sophie's death was my fault, that if I had been better, smarter, more persuasive, she would still be alive. She squeezed his fingers, but I was wrong. Sophie died because of a series of decisions made by a lot of people, most of whom never even knew she existed. Her parents who couldn't afford treatment, the insurance company that denied coverage, the construction workers who cut corners, and yes, you, for signing papers without understanding what they meant. I don't deserve your forgiveness. Maybe not. Emma met his eyes. But I'm going to give it to you anyway, because holding on to anger and guilt doesn't bring Sophie back. It just destroys the people who are still living. Nathan pulled her into his arms, and this time he was the one crying. They held each other in that dingy motel room, two broken people finally allowing themselves to feel the weight of their shared grief. I love you, he whispered into her hair. I know I have no right to say that. I know I've given you every reason to hate me. But I love you, Emma Carter, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to deserve you. Emma pulled back, her tear-stained face illuminated by the grey light filtering through the curtains. Then start by taking down Victoria Chen and giving me back the life she stole. Nathan nodded, feeling something he hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. Let's go home. The Blackwood Industries boardroom had never seen a meeting quite like this one. Nathan stood at the head of the table, wearing his best suit for the first time in a month, his posture straight and confident. Beside him was his legal team, armed with documents that had taken 3 weeks to compile. Across from him sat Victoria Chen, her composure beginning to crack around the edges as she realized the trap closing around her. This is highly irregular, Victoria said, her voice tight. The interim CEO should be chairing this meeting, not the subject of the investigation. The investigation is over. Nathan pressed a button on his laptop, and the screen behind him lit up with photographs and documents. Victoria Huang, also known as Victoria Chen, also known as Victoria Martinez and Victoria Park. 4 marriages, 4 dead or imprisoned husbands, 4 companies acquired through fraud and manipulation. The board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Victoria's face went pale. This is absurd. You're manufacturing evidence to save yourself. Actually, the FBI manufactured most of this evidence. They've been building a case against you for years. Nathan smiled, and there was no warmth in it. They were very grateful when I called to share what my investigators had found. Apparently, you're wanted in 3 states for securities fraud, wire fraud, and something called criminal impersonation of a corporate officer. The door opened and 2 federal agents walked in, their badges gleaming under the fluorescent lights. "Victoria Chen," one of them said, "you're under arrest. You have the right to remain silent." Victoria lunged for the window, but the agents were faster. Within seconds, she was in handcuffs, her designer suit rumpled, her perfect hair falling in her face. "This isn't over," she spat as they led her away. "I'll destroy you. I'll destroy everything you love." "You already tried." Nathan's voice was calm, almost gentle. "And you failed." After the agents had taken Victoria away, and the board had unanimously voted to reinstate Nathan as CEO, he found Emma waiting for him in the lobby. She wore a simple blue dress that made her eyes look like the ocean after a storm, and she was holding Oliver's hand. Martha stood beside them, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. "Daddy!" Oliver launched himself into Nathan's arms. "Did you get the bad lady?" "I got the bad lady, buddy. She's not going to bother us anymore." "Good." Oliver looked at Emma with adoring eyes. "Emma said I was very brave for waiting. She said the scary feelings were trying to come back, but I counted them away all by myself, just like she taught me." Nathan set his son down and looked at Emma. "You came. Martha called. She said you might need moral support." Emma smiled, and it was the first real smile he had seen from her since that night in his study. "Also," Oliver insisted, "he said his daddy needed Emma to make the scary feelings go away, too." Smart kid. They walked out of the building together, Oliver between them, holding both their hands. The October sun was finally breaking through the clouds, casting long shadows across the plaza. "What happens now?" Emma asked. "Now we start over." Nathan stopped walking and turned to face her. "I've made a lot of mistakes in my life, Emma. I've hurt people without meaning to, and I've failed to protect the people I love. But I'm going to do better, starting with you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Emma's eyes widened. "Nathan, I'm not asking you to marry me, not yet." He opened the box to reveal a simple silver ring with a small diamond. "I'm asking you to give me a chance, to let me prove that I can be the man you deserve, to let me spend the rest of my life trying to make up for the pain I've caused." "You're proposing in front of your company headquarters, with your 6-year-old watching. I figured if I was going to do something this terrifying, I should have backup." Nathan glanced at Oliver, who was grinning from ear to ear. "Right, buddy." "Emma, say yes." Oliver tugged on her dress. "If you say yes, you can live with us forever, and we can have pancakes every day, and you can teach me more counting games." Emma laughed, and it was the most beautiful sound Nathan had ever heard. "You're both completely crazy." "Is that a yes?" She looked at the ring, then at Oliver, then at Nathan. And for the first time since Sophie's death, she allowed herself to imagine a future that wasn't filled with grief and guilt. "Ask me again in 6 months," she said finally, "after we've had time to heal, after Oliver is stable, after we know this is real and not just trauma bonding. And then," Emma took the ring from the box and slipped it onto her finger, "and then I'll say yes." Nathan pulled her into his arms and kissed her right there in front of Blackwood Industries, in front of his son, in front of anyone who happened to be watching. When they finally broke apart, Oliver was making disgusted noises and covering his eyes. "Gross! You're not supposed to kiss in public. Get used to it, buddy." Nathan scooped his son up with one arm and kept the other around Emma. "There's going to be a lot more of that from now on." 6 months later, on a sunny April afternoon, Nathan asked the question again. This time, they were in the garden room, surrounded by the plants that Catherine had abandoned and the drawings that Oliver had created. Martha was there, crying happy tears. Oliver was there, wearing a tiny suit and carrying a pillow with 2 rings. And Emma said yes. The wedding was small and private, held in the backyard of the Blackwood estate, with only close friends and family in attendance. Emma wore a simple white dress, and Nathan thought she had never looked more beautiful. Oliver served as ring-bearer and nearly dropped the rings twice, which made everyone laugh instead of panic. Victoria Chen was convicted on 12 counts of fraud and sentenced to 30 years in federal prison. She never bothered them again. The Peterson Institute offered Emma her old position back, but she declined. Instead, she opened her own practice, specializing in children with anxiety disorders. Her client list grew so quickly that she had to hire 2 additional therapists within the first year. Nathan restructured Blackwood Industries' construction division, implementing strict safety standards that exceeded government requirements. He established the Sophie Reyes Foundation, which provided free mental health services to children in underserved communities. Emma served as the foundation's director. Martha retired at 75, but she never really stopped being part of the family. She moved into the guest house on the Blackwood estate and spent her days spoiling her grandchildren, 3 of them by the time Oliver graduated college. Oliver's anxiety never fully disappeared, but he learned to manage it. He grew into a confident, compassionate young man who wanted to be a psychologist like his stepmother. At his high school graduation, he gave a speech about the woman who had taught him to count away the scary feelings, and there wasn't a dry eye in the audience. And Nathan finally learned what his father had tried to teach him all those years ago, that success wasn't measured in profit margins or market shares, that the true worth of a man was determined by how he treated the people who needed him most. He had started this journey as a billionaire who had everything except what mattered. He ended it as a husband and father who had learned, through pain and loss and redemption, that love was the only investment that truly paid dividends. Every night before bed, he and Emma would stand in the doorway of their children's rooms, watching them sleep, and every night Nathan would whisper the same words, "Thank you for teaching me to count away the scary feelings." And Emma would smile and take his hand, and together they would walk into a future that neither of them had ever dared to imagine. Because sometimes the greatest love stories begin with a crisis. Sometimes the person who saves you is the one you least expect. And sometimes the babysitter's daughter turns out to be the key to unlocking everything you never knew you needed. The end.